the point I would make is you're going to have situations where your career goes on hold and you don't want it to. There are some things you can do to prepare for these times. The point of this show is crunch time, and the opposite. What about when you don't have to crunch? Is it necessary in order to succeed in life to be a workaholic? And by the way, I have workaholic tendencies. I like to work. I've worked very hard. I don't really know what to do with myself when I'm not working or playing. And so you can see my videos with Dr. Kanagia. I'm trying to become more at peace with myself, not needing to pursue every possible activity. But I have a lot of experience with crunch time. So let's talk about that. I think the main idea for a lot of folks here is, Guested, thank you for the Twitch Prime sub. Appreciate that. I think for a lot of the folks, you're in your 20s, sometimes early 30s, sometimes not even 20. And I just turned 50, so I've been in my professional career about 27 years, which for a lot of you probably seems like several forevers. And I get that because I assumed I would be retired when I was 40. Both I and my now ex-wife, when we were like in our late 20s, were part of startups. And we thought, you know what? Either your startup or my startup, one of them's going to hit and we're going to be owning islands by the time we're 40. And it didn't happen that way. And unfortunately, it probably won't happen that way for a lot of us. But if you have a normal length career, 30 some years, which I know if you're in your early 20s seems like, oh my God, but that's normal. And if you start your career really early, you might have a 40 some year career because a lot of people now work into their late 60s, early 70s. You have a lot of time. And you can't push flat out for 40 years. It won't work. Even though I do a lot of hard work, there have definitely been times where I've been burnt out and needed time off and downtime. So I've been at Amazon 15 years, and there have been at least 2 times there I've kind of burned out and needed to step back. Luckily, I've been able to do that in the course of my business and get back on my little pony and keep riding. But I'm gonna talk about that. The key thing to understand is that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And if you try and sprint your way through your whole career, you'll collapse. In climbing, there are 2 ways to climb a mountain. One is to take a very slow and steady pace, and the other one is nicknamed Dash and Gasp. And what happens is people start blazing up the mountain or up the trail, and they run out of air, and you find them in a switchback, just not moving and panting, and then they zoom by you again because they've caught your breath. And they do this for a little while, but eventually they burn up all their energy. And the person who just keeps going can go all day. You have to see a career this way. Consistent performance over time will usually trump quick runs at success. So chasing fast success by I'm going to work really hard can be good, and I'll talk about that, but usually you burn out. There's another saying. I love to give you guys memorable sayings that you can take away and store in your brain that are just a few words long, because they're easy to remember to apply and say, oh, am I doing that? The Army, the Navy SEALs, but I think this is a much older quote, have a quote that says, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And what it refers to is that if you hurry too much, you make mistakes. It's the old kind of colloquial wisdom, there's never time to do it right, but there's always time to do it over. That isn't how we want to approach work or career or school. It's a little bit better to take a little bit more time and do it right the first time and do it well and then move on, because it's much more important to get things all the way done. Yeah, so Emmett Shear, I talk about him sometimes, CEO of Twitch. His version of this is he likes to quote, well, we're already late, so we can't possibly stop to get directions. And these are all forms of mistaking frenetic activity for viable progress. In any case, the point here is most effort is wasted. If you look at Tim Ferriss and the 4-hour work week, if you know the Pareto principle and the 80-20 principle that 80% of the value will come from 20% of the work, it's better to take your time, choose the most important work, do that really well, and ignore the rest. And I've talked about that before with priorities. But I do want to talk about crunch time. And I do want to talk about when can you step back from your career. And the thing I would say is, because your career is long, pausing your career for 6 months, a year, even 2 years, if you're looking on a 20-year or 40-year horizon, doesn't matter. So for example, I took a leave of absence from Amazon between when I ran the Amazon App Store and when I started at Twitch. And Awesome Dave, who worked with me at Amazon at that time, has taken a leave of absence as well. We did it for different reasons. But I took 3 months off because I was essentially burnt out from working on the App Store, and I needed that time to recuperate. By taking 3 months off, and basically, by the way, I did not travel the world. I basically sat at home. In Devon language, I potatoed. By spending some time in potato mode and going hiking and camping and swimming, I did it in the summer. I aimed for the good summer weather here. I was able to recuperate and come back into Twitch full of energy. And that's what led to all the stuff we've talked about, where I was able to come up with the Bits product, help launch that, tiered subs, sub gifting, community gifting, etc. Now, I was off for like 12 weeks. That's awesome. 12 weeks is great, but it's not a huge amount of time. And by taking that break, I was strong for the next couple years. So push hard, but know when to get your rest. So when do you push hard? Well, when there's a big project, a big deadline, the game industry is famous for crunch time. Sometimes pushing something over the line so that you can be with the team that ships it or invents it or finishes the building or whatever it is you do, gets to finals time and aces the finals in your classes, that's worth pushing and going without sleep and doing whatever you need to do. But you can't do that all the time. And my real message is you don't need to. Claim your victories, rest, think about what to do next, make another big impact, rest. That's okay. And it's okay not to be always going flat out because you need extra in you. If you're a manager, try not to create crunch time for your teams if you don't have to. Try not to create artificial crises. If you can get your team working hard every day but not killing themselves and working smart every day, you'll get more than if you just burn them out. Because smart workers in this modern day will leave, right? At least in the US, I think unemployment's about 3.5%. It's essentially zero in the tech world or very close to it. So what we had just covered is you have to pace your efforts. And I want to talk about the other side of that. why would you pause your career? Why would you ever step away from your career? Well, first, career is super important. It pays the bills. It may give you some satisfaction. But generally, my opinion is you work in order to live and do other things that are important to you. You don't live in order to work. Most people feel, even if they like their jobs, that they'd rather be doing something else because it wouldn't be called work, and work wouldn't be a four-letter word if it was fun. Now, it is true if you have a job you love or a good job, you may dislike it less or burn out less frequently or be very happy to work there some. But I would encourage you know why you're working. And the point is, some of those things will cause you to pause your career. You can need to focus on kids, sick parents, sick grandparents. You might lose your job, which would be a pause. I don't hide the fact I got divorced. When I got divorced, actually that made me work really hard because home sucked. And so I did my best work after my divorce in many ways because I wanted someplace not home to be. Is that a good reason? Well, it's truthful. So what I'm telling you is when you're in the mood to work and you have the time and the energy, get the most out of it because sometimes life will tell you you need time off. Plus David, awesome Dave, is one of the people who's been through this. I have other coworkers who sometimes come into this channel. They got injured or sick. And so Dave had a bad fall. He shattered his elbow into 13 pieces. It had to be replaced with titanium in an emergency surgery on a Saturday night. Worked out pretty well in the sense that the Saturday night surgeon was able to fix him up. But he needed time off work as a result. And so sometimes life will deal you an unexpected pause. And that's okay. Yeah, it was awful, right? The point I would make is you're going to have situations where your career goes on hold and you don't want it to. There are some things you can do to prepare for these times. There also ought to be times where your career is going to go on hold and you kind of know, like maternity leave or paternity leave. You're going to start a family, or you're going to change jobs, or you're going to go back to school, or you can see that a parent is slowly getting sicker and you're going to have to take family and medical leave to take care of them. You can plan ahead for that and start saving money and telling your boss or your network, building your network, hey, I'm going to have to step away for a while. So, yes, paternity leave is a thing. It's mixed in the US. It's bigger in Europe. But it's becoming more common here. So it never happened for me when I had kids, but it's now more common. So at the same time, when you're about to go into crunch mode, some crunches are predictable. Don't get caught by surprise. Accountants have year-end close. Game companies are famous for crunching the ship of products. Software companies as well. Construction is cyclical. There's lots of businesses where you can see the crunch coming. Take your rest before that so that you can be the hero or heroine during the crunch by being ready. Take your vacation in the off season, rest up, and be ready to be the dramatic delivering leader because that's a chance to stand out. So, all right. The last thing I would say, and I know it will be hard, it's very first world advice. It's good advice around the world, but you've got to be in a certain situation to do it. Try not to live on every penny you make. And worse, a lot of Americans at least, they live on 110% or 120% of what they make. They're always borrowing into the future and carrying a lot of debt. Devin and I are going to do a personal finance show at some point in the future. But just realize if you're always pushed up against your money limit and then a career pause hits, you're trapped. Or if your boss wants to demand a ton of crunch time and turns out to be one of the bosses I say you should leave, you're trapped. And I have employees who do this right now, that they spend everything they make and more. And so they're, even though I'm not trying to trap them, they're trapped. And like they're hanging on every hope of, are they going to get a raise, a big enough raise to cover the credit card bills they rang up over Christmas. And look, I understand money management. It's a incredibly difficult topic. And a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck, the vast majority of the world. But as people here say, as Fastro123 says, use 70%, save 30%. That would be awesome. Save if you can. So, and there's tons of good books about this. But look, it can start small. One way I heard about, and probably most folks watching this particular chat don't smoke, but one way people stopped smoking is packs of cigarettes now are $5, $6, $7 a piece. They would take the money and put it in a jar on their table, and they saw so much money going into that jar that they realized, you know, if I just stop smoking, it's 2 packs a day and a month. It's like $400 a month. And they would see that much money and be, oh my God, you know, maybe if I just saved that. Actually, I'll tell a great story I wasn't thinking about telling. So years ago, a boss of mine and I, we hired a climbing guide to go rock climbing outside of Las Vegas. We were in Las Vegas for the Consumer Electronics Show, which is in January. But Las Vegas is pretty warm, so we went out to the desert with this climbing guide to climb. And we did a climb all day, and we were walking out, and he mentioned that he owned Amazon stock. And that was kind of a surprise, because what I knew about him was during the day he was a climbing guide, and at night he played trumpet in one of the shows in Vegas. And he'd been doing that for years. That was his whole career. He was like he's older than I am. So at that point he was probably like late 40s. And he was a climbing guide and a trumpet player. And but he owned Amazon stock, and as it came out, he had this big tech stock portfolio. And so I asked him, well, how did you get into tech stocks? And he said very casually, he said, well, were you into that whole cocaine thing in the 80s? Because I was. And my boss, who was even more straight-laced than I am, and I understand I'm pretty straight-laced despite the Moscow Mule, just looked at him like he was an alien. But he kept right on going. And he said, yeah, I was into it. But one day, I thought, you know, what if I took all this money I'm using on cocaine and put it in the stock market instead? And so this like 20s, early 30s trumpet player in Las Vegas decided to stop putting his money up his nose and start putting it in tech stocks. And as a result, he's very well off. And so there are a lot of ways that you can choose to modify your life. So that's financial lesson one and only for tonight. But yeah, it blew my damn mind. Like this guy just casually like, oh yeah, that cocaine thing in the 80s, I was really into it. And then I thought, you know, maybe not. So I asked some other people about this. The last point I make is the right time to accelerate your career is when you have the time and energy to do so, because sometimes you won't have the time or you won't have the energy. So if you have the time, energy, and opportunity to double down on your career, do it. But if you have to step back and pause, the main thing I would say is, as long as you can cure the reason for the pause and you know what you're investing in, have some confidence that over the arc of 20, 30, 40 years, you do not need to be running flat out all that time. I guess I do have, it's rant time, and then I'm going to take the questions. So here's the rant. In my opinion, your career is not your life. And unless there might be a few places where you can say, my career is so important, what I am doing is so important that putting everything else secondary makes sense, because my life should be my career. I would not do that for money. That's my opinion. If you're very close to curing cancer or curing AIDS or curing some horrible disease, or economically you think you have the answer to ending poverty, or you're a politician who's about to bring peace to the world or reverse global warming, yeah, maybe that is worth your whole life and you can be a martyr and we can build you a statue. But your work is never going to thank you, and there's no humanity in work. There's no personal connection. So one of the reasons I do this show is I love my job, but actually helping you guys is more satisfying. I like my work and I get a lot of satisfaction out of it. But the stories I see from you about how I help someone get a job, or I help them feel better about their work and get more comfort in it, way more satisfying. And again, my team listens. I love the work I do at work, but my rant would be people get sucked into chasing money and chasing rank, and I did it. I chased getting promoted to vice president at Amazon and many other places. It's a fun journey, but in the end, if you don't have meaning behind it, you won't have satisfaction. And so instead, I'd rather be here in my good friend Dave's basement, where soon one day we'll have an audience, and be planning on eating dinner with him and his wife after we're done. You guys have questions. We're going to take the first one. We'll pin it to the top and go for it. With a constant need to balance personal health, family life, and career, how do you distinguish when it's the right time to push harder? When you're close to a promotion, if you're working in classic corporate world, it's just like cramming for an exam when the evaluation is near. This is well known. It should not be this way. But there's plenty of science that shows that, like, your so-called annual review is whatever the hell your manager and your peers remember from the last few months. So our annual reviews for our work are now. You can do great work in May, June, July. Those are going to have less impact on your review and on your career than the work you do in November, December, January. Basically, you need to push when you see there's an achievable goal you can claim. So finals week, everybody knows this from college. You jump in at finals week and you kill it and you push your grade over the line. There's times when you should always be working consistently, but when you see the chance to stand out, the other chance where you can stand out is a crisis. You screw up, or someone else screws up, or a black swan arrives in business. You better do something, and that's a time to push. So I'll tell another story. I didn't know this story would be relevant. I have a friend, he went to China. He's an American. He married a woman in China. He went to China, and he lives in the city, I think, of Chongqing. And he started a series of brew pubs. So like American style Western brew pubs in the city. But those brew pubs have had a black swan event. Specifically, they've been closed because of coronavirus. So his brew pubs can't operate. They're closed by law. And so he's going bankrupt. The result is he now has a crisis. It's time for crunch time. His plan, as he tells me, is to come back to the U.S. with his family and get a job here. But the point is, when is there a big gain or a big crisis? That's when to save your crunch time. And you may have to sacrifice some personal health, some family life, in order to bring up career. I've talked about this before. There is this idea of work-life balance versus work-life harmony. And harmony basically means that you found this place where you feel good about both your work and your life, either because they're the same thing or because you're satisfied with the ratio, even if they aren't quote unquote in balance. Sometimes, though, you do put things out of balance for a short period of time. And I would say, when are you fixing a crisis, or when do you have a chance at a big gain? For example, a company that's growing super rapidly and they keep promoting people because they're growing very fast, or a team that's growing very fast and they'll let you step up because there's no one there to do it, and so they'll give you a chance to step up. That's your golden opportunity. So that's when I would do it. All right, we've beaten that question to death. So our next question is, what are the first signs that you need to slow down your pace? You're making a lot of mistakes. You're so tired that you're not doing good work. You're just doing a lot of work. So the second reason to slow down your pace is if your health is suffering. Because in the beginning, you may suffer. You'll notice yourself making mistakes. But if your health starts suffering, eventually that's going to catch up with you. And so we all have some reservoir that we can put in, but your health is your most precious resource in the long term. It's the only thing that's going to stay with you long term. And so gives you the capacity to do good work. I talk about it sometimes when I'm streaming from home and it's easy for me to put it on screen. I pull up an article, you can find it in the Harvard Business Review, called Manage Your Energy, Not Your Time. When to slow down is when you don't have energy to think. I've talked about how when you want to invent, you need thinking time. So the first signs that you need to slow down your pace. Oh, another good one is your personal relationships are suffering. So I've given a short list here. You're making mistakes, your health is suffering, your personal relationships are suffering. My wife gives me excellent advice and sometimes says, hey, you haven't been home in a few nights. If I'm listening closely, there's a message in that, right? And so pace matters. Look, I'm all about working hard, by the way. When I talk about this managing your pace, throughout my career, I've averaged working 55 hours a week is my best guess. Sometimes I've had weeks where I've worked 80 plus. I've had weeks where I've gone and been unreachable out in the wilderness and worked 0. But my long time sustained average is about 55 hours of work. Right now, being transparent so you all know, 55 hours is my long-term average. Being very transparent, now I work about 50 hours a week, a little bit less, and I put about 10 hours a week into this stream, maybe a little bit more, this stream plus streaming with Devin. So if I consider this work, I'm back above 60 hours a week, maybe pushing 65, because I spend a lot of time in our Discord helping people. So like driving home tonight after dinner, I'm going to be on the phone with one of our guests trying to solve one of our supporters of the channel who does a lot of work for us, trying to help him with his career. And Friday night, I was helping someone else. So you can spend a lot of time in work, but you've got to have it be in balance. So when you need to slow down is when you're starting to hate your job because you're there too much. Because if you're just sitting around, how many of you have done this? We haven't asked chat any questions yet. How many of you spend a reasonable amount of time at your job thinking, God, I hate this? You're actually at your job, or you have to go to your job and you're dreading it and thinking, I hate this. What is defined as crunch? 80 hours plus. Digit King says, a lot of people in finance work 60 to 80 hours, so it's hard to know what's normal. Well, it's certainly true that in professional work, I would say crunch depends. But if you're working 80 hours, truly working 80 hours a week, as opposed to present in the office surfing Facebook, you're in an extremely demanding job that I would be trying to figure out how do I get somewhere that's rewards me for doing fewer things smarter. And we have a finance team. I know they work very hard, but 80 hours, if you sleep a normal amount, you don't have much life left after 80 hours and sleeping. So, and for those of you who go to work and hate it, I'd start thinking about how do you slow down and how do you put some of that energy elsewhere. Yeah, 80 hours is founder's hours. I agree, Beefy TV. I completely agree. If you're working that much, you better have equity in the company and you're going to end up, with a yacht. Because otherwise, you only have one life and so many heartbeats, and you're putting an awful lot of them into other places. I've worked 12 hours a day for 20 plus straight days, and it was great with the right crew. And I've done less than 40 hours with the crew I didn't like, and it was worse. Yes, and that has to do with loving your work. If you have great teammates, they can make it really happy. Good, yes, everybody here is singing the praises of good coworkers. Absolutely. It's why this is fun with you guys and with people like Dave and his wife who make this a super pleasant environment, and my whole stream team. That's why I do this extra work rather than just go home after 50 hours. So, and in the construction industry, Ed, I love it when you come by because you give a different perspective. You get paid by the hour, as I understand it. And if you have a great crew, it's a ton of fun and you can see your tangible progress. Slogging away at an office on a salary and your hours just go up and you get no more, you want to try and change that to be sustainable. And again, I'm all about hard work. That's why I talked about my hours. I'm not saying, I've read the 4-hour work week. I talk about the 4-hour work week, but I've never had a 4-hour work week. So read the book. Maybe you can figure out how to have a 4-hour work week. I haven't figured it out yet. Beefy TV. Okay, so you're asking, look, people with equity, particularly early people at a startup, you should set their expectation that they should work a lot. That said, remember, this is another thing. Some people can work 80 hours a week and be effective 80 hours a week. Some people above 50 or so, their efficacy goes to shit and they're just not capable. They may get a ton done in those 50 though, so you really want to manage by how much value you're getting, not by hours. That said, if you join a startup, you should expect to work. The next question, just had a title change, big pay raise, and I'm now in a low stress role. Should I push the pedal to the metal and push to get a high rating in the next review cycle, or relax and work on networking for my next role? Well, so you've done something called narrow framing, which is you've made it completely an either or. There are other choices than what you've listed. But answering you directly, if you just got the title change, the big pay raise, and low stress, eat it up for a little while. Okay? Eventually, you'll want to jump in and push hard again. But it's okay. You've run the race. You've run the first leg of the relay. It's okay to take that breath and reset. And frankly, if you're in a normal company, you're not going to have a chance to get another big raise and another title change the next year. If you are, maybe consider it. But most places, the pace is a little slower. And so you've just gotten there. Take the time, get a little bit of rest, decide what you want to do, and go do it. Now, you said, relax and work on networking for your next role. Well, you can relax and choose your next project. You can relax and figure out your next skill. You can relax and see if you want to go on to a different group. There's a lot of different relax and variations, but I would absolutely, if I've pushed across the finish line, take a minute, enjoy it, because life is short, find the next thing, build the skills or network you need to, and then hit it again. I think that doesn't mean totally screw off. It doesn't mean just throw your hands up and quit working, because consistent effort over time, I recommended earlier, matters. but I would not just push hard all the time. You've just done a push. I'd pull back, do good work, figure out the next push, wait till this finish line is measurable in sight, and then push across it again. That is my best advice. It's what I've seen work. It's what I see work. By the way, I have employees who are listening. So people on my team, I don't want them to go flat out all the time. I want them to save a little bit of reservoir so when we need it, they can, and they don't mind doing it. Okay, I'm feeling really bad about my manager denying my L6 promotion after 2 years in the team. So this must be someone from Amazon who's asking. L6 is basically like our senior role. It stands for level 6, and it's generally people who are 6 to 10 years into their career. And so anyway, it says, denying my L6 promotion after 2+ years in the team, being the best engineer by far, can be validated by peers. Okay, that's important if you have that peer validation. Not sure what to do. I can give up all my work and change teams, but that would seem like a mistake. What's your advice? All right, great question. And I'm going to generalize it outside of Amazon. So here we have someone, because when I'm here, and they'll pop up the views warning, when I'm here, I don't speak on behalf of Amazon or Twitch. I speak based on my experience. And it's awesome having all you in chat chiming in and discussing with each other. And I have watched Jira Dreams of Sushi. That's an awesome situation of a guy whose work and life were the same. If you want to see someone who's totally into his work in a way that I don't really get exactly, Jira Dreams of Sushi is like a great 75 or 90 minute watch. It also will make you very hungry if you like sushi. So on this question, if you're near promotion or you think you should be, but your manager isn't acting, you need to find out why. So you say, in this case, the person says their peers validate they're doing the best work. Great, that might be true. Go find out from your manager why they're not acting. First, don't get into this situation. And I'm not dogging on this person who asked the question, but don't get into the situation where you're hoping for something and you haven't had the conversation with your manager. What will it take for me to move up? What would it take for me to reach this level? Are you ready to start working on that? Because I think I'm ready and I would like to move up. My career is important to me. Lots of people haven't had that conversation with their leaders. I ask this here in chat all the time. I've done it a bunch of times. There's quite a few managers who sit in our chat, who lead teams or lead companies. If we ask them how often, I don't even need to do it. If we ask them how often employees come into them and say, I'm very dedicated to this company and to our goals. I really want to progress. Can you take a little bit of time and help me know what I need to do to progress, and then I will go do it and bust my butt to achieve it? It's very rare. It's extremely rare. And Hephaestus has exactly the right framing. What would it take for, or what would have to be true for? And as he says, it's very rare. And Sean123 runs a pretty big company. He says, not too many. They assume that we are mind readers. Exactly. So I don't know if this person asked their boss or not, but you should have. And for everybody out there, this is actually a really good point. I talk about this all the time, and it stuns me because last week in chat, I asked chat, how many of you have gone and asked your boss how to communicate with them effectively? And the answer was almost nobody. And almost none of the bosses had ever been asked, like, hey, what communication style works for you? Do you like text? Do you like email? Do you like Slack? What communication style works for you? Do you like me to stop by your office and poke my head in? We've never been asked. Tonight's best lesson is, if you work in any sort of thing except you're your own entrepreneur and you're self-employed, ask your boss some questions about what they like and what they expect from you. Nobody friggin' does it and your life can be so much easier. Instead, I'm tempted to play act, right? You're like closing your eyes and stumbling around blindly at work. And you're telling yourself, I'm busting my ass, I'm busting my ass, I'm the best engineer, I'm the best this, I'm the best that. It may not be what anybody wants from you. Now, I'm sure you're doing good work in this example. Hey, feel free. I have tried to give somebody, Domkang says, can I have your job? We love that question. We love people to come to us and ask, how can I get your job? So we don't mind ambition if you're willing to back it up. Now, if you're expecting like, oh, I'd like your job, but do none of the work. I once had a good friend. He's still a good friend, but his wife told me once, I'm going to use a different name, but he said, oh, Fred really wants to be a VP of engineering, except without all the direct reports or needing to make so many meetings. What the hell? Yeah. Well, I'd like rainbows to come out of my butt too. That isn't the job. And so if you want to move up, you got to understand that just wanting a bigger title and paycheck isn't going to do it. So now answering the rest of this person's question, though, they found themselves in this situation. There's some stuff they maybe should have done. We don't know if they did it or not, but they've been working very hard and they've been doing what in their mind is good work for 2 years. Now what? You need to go find out what your manager's looking for and what their expectations are. Now, if you have a boss who says, oh, this is what I'm looking for, and here's my thought, and here's how you can get there, stay in the team. If you're working for a boss who either gives you irrational answers, like, oh, well, I believe this is a 6-year position, and really there's nothing you could do to move up faster than that, don't stay. Similarly, this one's tougher. If it turns out they have a valid answer for what you need to be doing, but you haven't done it yet, then you have a little bit of a choice. Do it somewhere else and start over blindly with a manager who maybe know better, or realize you made a mistake. This is one of the hardest things to do in a career. Face up to the fact and eat it that you screwed up. And it may not be that you broke anything terribly, but that you made a mistake and didn't invest in what you should have been, or didn't ask the questions. And so you've been slaving away, but not on what was needed. You have to decide, you have to go find that out. So in this situation, my advice is go talk to your manager, because you say your manager denied your L6 promotion. Okay, why did they deny it? Because if you go to a boss, you say denied. If they denied your promotion, find out why. Get the feedback. And then remember, I've done whole other episodes on feedback. Feedback is a gift. If you've been given feedback, remember that feedback is always true in one of two ways. Either A, most likely, by the way, it's based in some truth and you should listen and figure out what do I need to change or improve. Or B, people perceive you that way and you still need to change somewhat. You have to figure out, why are they perceiving you this way? Even if you're like, nope, that's not me. It's not true. I have other people who say I'm so lovable. There's no way I'm an abrasive jerk. Someone perceives you as that. Figure out why. So either way, feedback is true because it's a problem for you that you're perceived that way. I think I've answered this one pretty thoroughly. It depends on what situation you're in. If you have a boss who just isn't able to give you a roadmap. Oh, by the way, there is one more thing. You could be the best engineer by far, but still not be doing work at the level and complexity of the next level. So your two statements don't have to be incompatible. In other words, you might be the best engineer by far, and you might still not be qualified for the next level. So the next question is, are there any good books or articles you recommend to further learn Oh, people voted. Yep. Are there any good books or articles you recommend to further learn about managing crunch time in your career? Um, Most of them would be about priorities. So the number one book in this space, probably, there's a ton of books on this. Um, the number one book in this space is probably The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's older now, but it's an amazingly strong book. The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss can help you with how to use the 80-20 rule and some things about time management. And then Eat That Frog, which is a book about prioritization. So those 3 books. But yeah, Stephen Covey. And I don't think the Stephen Covey book is on my book list right now. So someone can, one of the mods can link to that in chat. Oh, really? There's a sequel called The Eighth Habit. I'll have to look at that. Next question. All right, this one's loaded. I like it. Do you ever regret getting to your current position or the race to get there? Would you have done anything differently or in a different time frame? Hell yes. So I pushed very hard at Amazon. I said earlier in this broadcast, I was getting a divorce, and so I was unhappy at home, and so I poured my heart into work. That was fine. It was a good use of time and energy. It gave me a place, and I climbed the ladder very quickly. What I'm trying to tell you guys and trying to save you the pain is I didn't have the patience to realize I probably would have gotten to the same place with less pain if I'd just stepped back and been a little more smart about it and a little less, I'm going to work like a dog. I was telling Devin Nash, I saw him a few days ago. It's only in the last year I've developed a new trick. And so you're always learning. And the whole point of this stream is to try and equip you with what I learned the hard way 20 years in advance so you don't have to do it my way. You can do it smarter. What I told Devin is I learned every day I take the train to Seattle. I live outside the city. And when the train arrives, I walk across town. And on that walk, I spend the walk thinking, what is the one most important thing I need to get done here at work today? And this is all from that book I was just talking about, Eat That Frog. If you get the most important thing done, there's a good chance you don't need to do anything else that day because most of our work is kind of wasted. It's pushing paper around. It isn't that impactful. But it's also true, usually the thing you haven't done when you get to work is because somehow it's distasteful or hard for you. It uses a skill you're not that good at, or you've been putting off or procrastinating. And so something that you just know, if I do this, it'll be good for my career, it'll be good for our team, it'll be good for our project. But I don't like spreadsheets, or I don't like writing, or I don't like rearranging cables under my desk, or buying things, or whatever it is that you're putting off. Think this through. Your day can go one of 2 ways. You can go into work and be like, I don't really want to be here. I kind of need to get my day started slow. I'm going to start my inbox and answer some easy emails. And so you do the easiest thing you need to do that day. You do an easy thing. Then after you've done that easy thing, you're like, well, that wasn't too bad. I'll do the next thing. But it's a little harder and you're a little less excited about it. And you do that next thing. Now you've knocked off the 2 easy ones. The next thing you're going to do is a little bit harder. The point is, by the end of the day, when you've got the least energy, you're left with the hardest things. So what do? You go surf the web. You come watch some Twitch. You go do anything except those hard things. So the hard things get pushed to the next day. And then the next day. And then the next day. Conversely, if you gut up somehow and in the morning do the hardest thing, then by definition, you've done the hardest thing you had to do that day. The next thing you get to do is easier. So you do the second hardest thing. And sure, it's still a pain in the ass and it's not to your taste and it's hard, but it's easier. And your day goes downhill in the sense of you're sledding downhill and picking up speed, because by the end of the day, when you're low energy, you can totally just clean up your inbox, send networking emails, all the light and fluffy stuff, because the really hard stuff you did in the morning. All right. So, what else would I have done differently? I don't regret where I got. I do regret, though, that I didn't enjoy the ride. I was so focused, so wound up and uptight, because I'm a type A person. I didn't see how much fun I could have been having. I have a weakness where I'm so focused on the job, I don't appreciate the journey. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Go to Dr. K's channel for that sometime. I can't tell you how to change that, but try to, stop and smell the roses, enjoy the journey. I worked with great people, but I was always like, am I getting there? Am I on the right track? Do I have the right projects? Am I doing the right things? That's all important, but sometimes I forget to enjoy the ride. And so what I would say to you, and what I think I would do differently or in a different time frame, is I would take a little bit more time to enjoy the ride. And I think if I had been a little smarter, do the hardest thing every morning, I could have enjoyed the ride and gotten to the same place. There are things I would have done differently. And the summary of what I would have done differently is had a little more faith that it was going to work out and I didn't have to be uptight about it. Once you had enough money to take those risks without worrying about financial stability, yes, of course. I wish everyone was gutsy enough that, including myself, by the way, to take risk that included financial risk, that included I might lose my house, my car, I might go bankrupt. Very few people are comfortable with that level of risk. So getting to a place where I had some money in the bank and I could afford to say, well, if I lose my job, I can keep my house and car until I find another job. Yeah, it made it easier to take risk for sure. Which, by the way, is one of the advantages of living below your means, if you can, even for a short time. Because once you have that buffer, psychologically you have it, and actually economically you have it. You don't necessarily have to build it bigger and bigger. If you get to where you have 6 months of living expenses in the bank, then you have 6 months. And if you don't blow it, bottom line is, sure, try and save up a little bit of a nest egg, because then you can take more risk. Then you can do more things that interest you and go more out on a limb and feel better about it. Okay, next question's got a lot of votes now. How do you know whether to take a different career path or stay in the current one you're more familiar with? What are some metrics or advice we can use to determine what is the best path forward? Once again, I refer you to the book Decisive. It's my #1 book recommendation of all time. I haven't found a better book, not because it's the best written, not because it's the deepest, but because it's the easiest to apply and make practical. And what it says about this is find a way to test that other career path. So, for example, someday I may change away from working at Amazon to do coaching and streaming full time. This is a great test of how much do I like that. I have Amazon. I love it. My team builds Twitch Prime. I work with awesome people. I have a great boss. This is a chance for me to test that. I've also have a friend. It doesn't matter. I test things. The book says try things. Find people in that career. Talk to them about what's good and bad at it. See if you can take a sabbatical or a leave or even a vacation from what you're doing and try the other path. See if you can find some people who hate that other path and see why they hate it. Try to find any other way to sample that path before you have to jump and commit, is my advice on taking a different career path. Find any way to get as much information. I'll put it this way, for example. When I wanted to start streaming on Twitch, I formulated a plan to do it safely and to try it. And so about a year ago, I started working with my good friend Dave here. And we started setting up test streams. and I didn't announce them, and I didn't put them on LinkedIn, and I didn't, frankly, I knew what Discord was, but I didn't use Discord. Um, I invited only my friends to those streams so I could try it out in a place where I wouldn't be embarrassed if I sucked or it didn't work. So find a way to test before you change. For example, I understand 70% of lawyers would advise someone going into college not to go to law school. So if you think you want to be a lawyer, maybe talk to some lawyers. You think you want to be a doctor, an engineer, whatever. You can also find out about the economics. The last thing I haven't said is see if you can volunteer or intern or shadow someone any way to get a little sample of that career before you jump. Next question, a lot of votes. How should you pace getting a new title? Is there some time range one should reach each level? This might be an internal Amazon thing where they're asking about specific roles, but that's something you have to find out from like HR and asking around with peers in a company, whether it's Amazon or somewhere else. You have to find out what is the norm. Big companies, like we happen to have stats at Amazon where we know the average for each level and kind of the mid and the max, but you can find that out from talking to your peers. The bottom line is there is, answering the question as directly as possible, there is a time range at each level. So you should just figure out what that is, and then try and beat it. Maybe not crush it, but try and be on the good side of it. And go ask your boss, to the point earlier, hey, what would it take? I'd like to move up. I know the average is 3 years. I'd love to be ahead of that. What would it look like? What sorts of things have you seen in people who've been promoted in 2 years? I'll give you an example. At Amazon, I was 6 years at the director level before I became a vice president. I saw several people, not very many. The fastest I saw it done was 3 years. And then I know several people who took 9 years. So I ended up in the middle, but I've seen it on both sides. So I knew I was roughly in the right range. You can get information like that, and you're just trying to stay at the average or beat the average. Speed isn't everything, as I've said earlier, but you should at least know what you really want to know. I was just helping someone. They're a mentor to someone who's behind the average. They're moving more slowly because this person had their boss change many times in a year, which set them back. You want to know if you're dragging behind the average, because then we talked about crunch time. That's crunch time. Go fix it. Go act quickly. Okay, next question. How do you bring it up to a manager or company that you need a break or a sabbatical? Basically, it depends on how secure you are. But assuming your company has a policy or whatever, or even doesn't, you just have to talk. So, first, understand the policy. Research it if there is one. Second, try and find anyone else who's had a break or a sabbatical if there isn't one, and ask them a few questions about it. Then, eventually, you're going to either have to go to your manager or HR and say, look, I am interested in taking a sabbatical. I need to do it for my own personal development, satisfaction, and health. But I want to do it in a way that works for the company when it will cause, within reason, also meeting my needs, the least disruption. And I want to give you plenty of warning. That's ideal. If someone comes to me and says, hey, Ethan, I want to take a sabbatical, my first thought is, oh, fuck, I'm losing somebody I value. They're going to be out. I admit that. But if they say, look, I want to take this so I can come back stronger and ready to go and rested, and they give me warning, I'm like, okay, I can deal with this. I have time to figure out how to cover for them being out. I have time to get ready. I have time to backfill, and they're going to come back better rested. Now, there's always still the risk. Your manager's going to fear you're going to use that time to search for a new job, but that's okay. They're going to have to deal with it, and you'll quickly find out how much they value you. I am going to tell you and this is unfortunately sad, if you desperately need your job and your company has no sabbatical policy, you go ask this question at great risk. Because unfortunately, some companies may be like, oh, we don't have a sabbatical policy, but now we know you want to leave. Have a nice day back at your desk. You got to be careful with this. Good companies understand breaks and rest. Not every company is a good company, and not every boss is a good boss. One of my current employees came to my team after being on sabbatical, but he left his other team on good terms, and he told them, hey, I'm going to go out. And he took like 9 months off, spent time with his daughter, traveled the world. It set him back economically. I can't talk too much. I can't overshare, but you know, he took 9 months off. It's unpaid in that case because it was a very long time. So he opted into that economic cost because he wanted to spend time with his family. And he came to me and he's great. And he left his other team on good terms. But how do you bring it up? You research and then ask. All right, next question. How do you plan on your days, weeks, months to make sure you're going the right pace and doing the right things? Ugh. So those are all different time scales. Basically, you want to try and leave a buffer in each of them. So like if I could have, I've never achieved this, but if I could imagine the perfect thing, I've achieved one part of it and I'll share it. When I have a really good day set up, it has 2 unscheduled hours in it. Part of that's to read email and part of it's for disasters or fires, which I usually find in my email, so it works out well together. That way there's a buffer in my day every day. Similarly, I try to work Fridays from home, to have fewer meetings and to skip my commute so I can put more time into other things. So if you look at what I've done there, each day, on an ideal day, I have a little bit of buffer to deal with emergent needs. And each week I have a day where I can deal with emergent needs. I've never done this on a month scale, but I think it would be good somehow to plan your month to have like a down week, a week where there are no major projects or no major deliverables or big meetings. I've never thought that far ahead. I only do it on the day and week schedule. But what you want to do is you want to be pushing hard and doing important things and holding a buffer. And everybody has some analogy to this you can think about. If you're a sports person, you have a bench. You have people that can spell your starters and give them a break and a rest, or people who can step in for injured people. That's a sports analogy. If you like military analogies, all military commanders have a reserve. They have someone who can go and plug holes and hit weak spots. If you're a manager and you're setting up a project, you have a buffer or you have some amount of overage that you're looking at. Same thing in a budget. This is what you want to do with your career. You want to manage your career the same way you would a project, the same way you would a sports game. When life happens and you find yourself dealing with depression, what is the best way to get out of that and back on track? I am not a mental health expert. So I will take your question not to mean any type of clinical or mental health depression, but just feeling bad or down. Like normal, I feel a little bit overwhelmed. If you have one of the other problems, needs, please go see Dr. K on healthygamer_GG or a medical professional. But we all get bummed out. And we all feel down. That's normal. The normal things you do are wait, talk to people, get some sleep, look at your nutrition, see that paper I keep talking about, manage your energy, not your time. For some people, they have seasonal affective disorder. They need to get some sunlight. They need to take a break. They need a vacation. There's a ton of things you can do to have a pick-me-up. It's usually friends, food, health, rest, time. Sometimes it can be talking to your boss and saying, hey, I'm going through a rough period. Can we give me a couple weeks where you put me on something a little easier because I need a little time? It's time to speed run the questions. So we're going to start here with graduated with a degree in Mech E in 2019, but haven't been able to land a career yet. Unfortunately, I don't have any internship experience and technical skills are average. However, I do have excellent soft skills. How do I find a career path right for me? Okay, soft skills mean networking. So if you truly have good soft skills, build a network and get your job that way. Remember, it's not always the smartest or the person with the best hard skills who gets the furthest ahead. Honestly, I am not the best engineer. I was the best engineering leader in a set of peers, and I succeeded not by being the best technical person, but by being the best at getting through stuff. So I said I'd speed run these. I have one more thing I would say to you, which is read the book, What Color is My Parachute, which is on my book list, or I guess What Color is Your Parachute, by Richard Nelson something or other. Richard Nelson Bowles. What color is your parachute? It will help you figure out what you want to do. Next question is, what if your company provides no clear checkpoint and consistently reiterates a promising future and we're just a startup for 4 years? You're getting suckered and taken. That's what. Every time I ask for something to push for, they plead ignorance and act confused. There is no direction. I feel like you're spinning my tires. Well, good for you. You're exactly right. You are. This question that's up right now, though, if your company is jerking you around for this much time and you keep asking, unfortunately, you need to get out. You're being screwed or used. Now, if that company is about to go public for a gajillion dollars or some other very big type amount of money, and you have a bunch of equity, maybe you suck it up and your career suffers and your bank gets padded. That could be fine. But if that's not true, get out. Next question is, when do you know it's time to find a new job? That is way too broad. But I'll give the 30-second answer. If you're stuck and not progressing, if you're not learning, if you have a chance, if you have an absolutely terrible boss and you can prove that they're terrible, you actually know that's true. And you have a way to know it's true. And it's not just your opinion. Or you have a better opportunity. It's totally fine to upgrade jobs. You have a good job and you have a chance to get a great one. Those are all reasonable ways. And Taryn Fear, you say check on all those things, then it's time to get out. I say change your jobs a lot, but I've changed my job very rarely. You have to be careful. First, if you pick a good place, stay and work hard. Changing is risky. The next place might be worse. It might have worse sharks. You might go from snapping turtles to actually sharks, or sharks with frickin' laser beams. But you can't let fear keep you in a hellhole either. So it is a balance and judgment. All right, next question. What do you do when you get asked to do something illegal or not OSHA standards, either from your boss or all the way up the ladder? So I'm assuming this is from you, Ed. Look, I have the luxury of not doing illegal things. I would hope you have that luxury too. Ignore them, try and find a way around them, but in the end, don't do it. Nothing in your job is worth killing someone or injuring yourself or others, or going to jail. That kind of stuff, I've seen it. I've seen people do all kinds of horrible stuff in jobs. I once had the pleasure, long before Amazon, of defending I ran HR in a startup I was in, and I had the joy of defending our CEO from a harassment charge, which I believed he was guilty of. But that was my job, and it's not illegal to defend someone from a charge. I just had to take a side I didn't think they had to do, or that I thought they had done. So when we settled that, and the person, I felt good about that. But I would not do something illegal or outside OSHA's Occupational Health and Safety, or Occupational Safety and Health Administration. I would not do something illegal or unsafe. It's just not worth it. And yeah, you may get fired. You may have an angry boss. I would try to steer around it diplomatically. I would try to say, you know, I can't do that. I would do whatever I could to get out of it. How do you negotiate and manage priorities needing time for a relationship to prompt a drop from 110% to 80% in performance? Well, you may have to do it, negotiate by forcing it. You may have to negotiate by simply working less and seeing what happens. It turns out that people think if they back off at all or if they don't do something, they'll instantly get fired. And it doesn't really happen that often. It's also, if I've said this about workplaces before, if you don't set limits, they won't do it for you. Companies don't have souls in and of themselves. People at companies have souls and companies can have values. But the point is, if you give more to your company, they'll give you more money and more responsibility. And if you give more, they'll give you more. And if you give more, they'll give you more. And so it's a cycle. Yeah, someone says they burned out in the past. If you put your heart into a company, the company will say, thank you, we love you, you're performing great. Here's some more shit to do. Here's a big project where you can be a star and an opportunity. You will do that and do that and do that. Companies will let you kill yourself. You might have a boss who will pull you back from the brink, but companies will let you kill yourself if you do it. I would try and work around it, ask questions, say, what's another way? The way it was phrased earlier by Elite Hephaestus was what would need to be true for? So I would try and figure out what would need to be true for you to do this another way. What would need to be true for us to do this another way or us to do something else? I would try and negotiate around that, but I would refuse if you have to. Bottom line on this question, talk to your boss about why you want to step back and prioritize. You can probably drop from 110% to 80% effort by just figuring out 30% of stuff to ignore. I'm going to give you guys another blog to go look up. There's a distinguished engineer at Amazon. This is on LinkedIn. His name is Brad Porter. And if you Google Brad Porter selective negligence, he's got a 5-minute blog read about how he succeeded in Amazon knowing what to ignore. A lot of people here resonate with this idea that your company will very reasonably, not reasonably, but very naturally take what you will give. And if you don't set the limits, they will burn you out. That's common. And Ed, I see your comment. It's common that companies will let you burn yourself out if you don't pull back and stop. And I'm advising you set your own limits. Is it sustainable to work daily if you enjoy, I assume if you enjoy what you're doing and are passionate about your work when working somewhere between, I guess that's 12 and 14 hours a day? Maybe. If you're young and healthy and you love it, I think there are people who work 12 to 14 hours a day and love it. I'm usually not one of them. That's a little bit much for me. But yeah, work can be fun and energizing if you truly love it. I just wouldn't feel that you have to do that to be successful. All right, next. What do you like and dislike most about Seattle? So this isn't really a career question, but I'll buzz through it. I love the outdoors. Dislike, the growth and lack of any plan in Seattle to really deal with the homeless crisis. I won't go into the politics, but it's exploded in the last few years and related to homelessness, the drugs. And I love the outdoors, the skiing, the hiking, etc. Would you move somewhere else if the opportunity presented itself? Sure. There's a lot of cool places in the world. I love to travel. It's going to be tough to beat Seattle, but New Zealand is nice. London is nice. I've considered taking an overseas assignment for Amazon to go work in London, to have a chance to see that part of the world. So, yeah, so some people here in chat are unfortunately talking about the homeless crisis in Seattle. It's quite bad. So that's a big negative. I walk through it every day on my train ride. There are people trying to do some things about it, but I think the city leadership is not on the right path. So it's my opinion. I got to be clear. I speak for me, not for Amazon. It's my opinion. I walk through it every day, and I don't think we're doing the right thing. Moving on. How do you go about deciding if moving away for a job is the right move? Probably family versus opportunity. I moved for jobs a lot. I wasn't that close to my family. That had a cost, but I was okay with it. If you're really tied to your family or where you live, then maybe you take a lesser job. I read a quote on this. It's really good. It basically said, is your family or your job more important? Or if you're going to have a really long commute, they better both be important. But don't have a long commute or move for not really a better job. So how do you decide if moving away? Do you hate where you live and want to go somewhere else, and that's a way to get somewhere beautiful? Do it. Do you love where you live and the job's not much better? Don't do it. Learn to live on less. See all the stuff we talked about saving the money. All right, 2 more questions and we're good. When it's crunch time, what helps keep you grounded? For me, it's put my head down and get through the goal and know I'm going to succeed, and knowing that I've talked with my wife and family about how long it will last. It's also having a good boss. That's a long list, but crisis can be fun for a little while. What are productivity tips that have worked for you? This is the last question, and my productivity tip that's worked for me is come back Thursday at 6 o'clock when we talk about time management. So I didn't put that in there, but someone did a great job with a plug for our next live broadcast Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific. We'll talk about time management. So awesome. Hi, I'm Ethan Evans. I hope you've gotten a lot out of this show. To follow us on YouTube, please click the bell icon in the bottom left and subscribe. Also, you can find us live on Twitch, where we answer questions interactively. Further, we have a Discord community, where not only I, but other members of the community team up to answer your questions interactively. Hope you've enjoyed. Thank you.